Hey, fellow readers. Today, James Hannibal is joining me. He writes books that are fast-paced, action-adventure, and just from a different perspective than most of us will ever experience, which is from a spy's point of view. Paris Betrayal is the newest one. He's written several other titles that he can share with, and he's even going to share some about what he's working on next. So I'm looking forward to hearing all about it, but we're going to have James share a little bit about the Paris Betrayal first and tell us all about that story.
Okay, the Paris Betrayal, which you can see behind you, is a spy left out in the cold story. And this one, interestingly enough, inspired by the book of Job, but not strictly allegorical to the book of Job, because we didn't want to make it turn into easily predictable story. But if you look at God and Satan in the Job story as two spy masters talking about this extremely loyal spy, and that's how, when I was looking at that story one day, that's how it came to me. And so that's where the Paris Betrayal comes from. But Ben is this sort of top level spy. Everything is going great. His career is on track. And then everything gets, the carpet gets pulled out from underneath him. Everything goes wrong. And he finds himself having to seek answers. So he has to seek out the sniper who tried to kill him, the schoolmaster who trained him, the doctor who saved his life, and the man he believes is the one who killed the woman he loves. And so he's got to seek out these people in order to find answers and also to try to stop a terrible attack on the United States.
And only in a few pages, right?
Right. Yeah.
That, and I have to say that I know I said this before too, is I think I need to reread it just with your perspective behind it, because that makes it very interesting. And like I said, most of us won't experience that. Now, in your own life, if I may ask, is this something that's based on things that happened to you at all, or is it more people you knew? I mean, what kind of research do you do?
There's a very good mix of that. A lot of, I would say, there were not a lot of operational things that happened to me that make appearance in the stories. A lot of training I received does, and that's one of the unique things about this story is chapter by chapter you have these almost interludes. As I wanted to really dig into the thought processes and the training that goes behind when a spy is thrown out onto purely wits alone. His team is taken away from him, his resources are taken away, and he's really got to rely on all that training that is the worst case. And that's what you do when you do training for this stuff in various areas of operations. You're training for the worst case scenario. And so now we've thrown Ben into the worst case scenario, and he has to rely on that. And so you get these, and you'll see them I think in italics in the story, these interludes of him and his thought process. And that you kind of see into my mind, you see into the mind of some of my mentors, some of the people whose stories I got to enjoy over a long career in the military and intelligence.
May I ask, how long were you in the military?
15 years.
15 years. And you were is a pilot most of the time, all the time?
Yeah, my primary job was pilot.
Okay.
And I was but I had a degree in counterterrorism in Middle Eastern studies. I spoke, I do speak, but I'm a little bit rusty, Arabic and another language. And then I worked in the intelligence shops. And so on 9/11, I wrote right after the airplanes hit the towers, I wrote an intelligence briefing for our wing commander. And that briefing traveled. And so that earned me some other interesting jobs. I wound up in the stealth bomber and doing some other extracurricular activities.
Oh, how fun and interesting. So looking forward to some of that in books too. So there's some really good questions in the back of the book. I don't want to use most of them because I'm afraid to give something away if somebody hasn't read anything. But readers, go back and read those questions and study them and answer them for yourself because they're fascinating. And I think in a book club, they would be really great. But there's one, is Ben's severance fair? And then the follow-up question, is there such a thing as fair in the espionage world? And that, I can't answer that question. And maybe you can help us a little bit with that answer.
Sure, and I don't want to disappoint readers. I don't actually think they stuck those in the back of the cover or the copy. I think they're just using those for the Revell Book Club,
Ah,
so they won't find those questions.
don't look then.
So for answers, is what happened to Ben fair? Is what happened to Job fair? We have to come to grips in operations with the idea that we are cogs. We signed the bottom line to do a job, and that's the hard. You have the generals and the colonels who are making the really hard decisions of sending people into battle, into situations where they put their lives at risk. And when you're down on the front line operation, you have to know that you signed on that line, and they can use you. You're a tool. You're not, it's hard to be impersonal about that. And then when you get into a higher level position, it's hard to make that distinction. These operators are still tools that you have to use to accomplish an objective. So is it fair? No, there's no such thing as fair in that form in the operations. But when you talk about interagency bickering, when you talk about what one side does to the other side, then again, there are different levels of fairness. You get questions of fairness within an agency. Why am I being held down here, or an operation? Why don't I get this opportunity? And the thing is that everybody, when you get to that area, everybody has a specific skill set. And so it's not fair. It's not being bigoted. It's not anything. It's you meet this very narrow set of qualifications at this moment. And that's why this person is being placed here and this person is being placed here. And I've had several friends that have been frustrated with that. But I think in the end, we all understand that that's how it works kind of within organizations.
Interesting. And it's yeah, I don't think of the spy world espionage to be that way, that you have to be very almost indifferent to humans because you need them for a specific thing. That I love that perspective on it. So thanks for sharing that part. So that was really good. So there's a character in the original draft that dies, but in now the book that we read doesn't. What is the reason behind that you changed your mind? Is it something to do with the character? Is it something to do with yourself?
I think it's both. So, authors always get asked if people in real life represent characters in their books, or characters are taken from people in real life. In this book, because I was drawing on my own training and on stories from friends, and yes, absolutely, there are people in this story that represent real people to me. And in this case, that character who I killed off in the original draft, and then when I went through it, I'm not kidding. I was tearing up. I just couldn't do it. And the reason is this particular character represents two people. He is an amalgamation, a very sharp amalgamation of two people that are really important to me, that had a major impact on my career, on my life, that took the time to share their wisdom with me, to take me aside personally and guide me in some of the dark and shadowy places of military operations. And so it was just too real to me to kill this character off. And so I changed it, and I'm kind of hoping that the character makes another appearance in other books sometime. But what am I trying to say? Well, I felt like a failure in one regard of we teach that you can't fall in love with your characters. You have to be willing, like that colonel who's willing to send operators out into danger. You have to be willing to do what's necessary for the story. So sometimes that's a struggle with authors. This is the first time where I've let that emotion win and decided not to kill a character and to change that. And so for me, that's a worry as this book goes out in the world. Was that a failure on my part?
Well, having read it, I don't think so.
Oh,
so
well, I appreciate that very much.
So, I guess I'm used to characters. You start liking one and then, well, now they're dead. So
I killed a character in my Nick Barron series, and I led the readers to it. I thought I was leading the readers to it. If you're a sci-fi fan, you know what a red shirt is. That is a Star Trek term. The guy in the red, the yeoman in the red shirt is the one who's going to run off screen and go, ah! I go, oh, Thompson is dead. So I put this guy, every scene he appeared in through most of the story, he was wearing some kind of red shirt. And I only got one letter. You killed the red shirt guy. And I'm like, I thought that was like a dead giveaway. But anyway. It seemed to like go over everybody else's head. Maybe it's the wrong genre.
Concentrating on the story. So tell us a little bit about your writing process. Is it something where you're like, okay, I focus 5 days a week, or do you just kind of do it in bits and pieces? What works for you?
I write as much as I can. I'm an on-call pilot, active, and I often never know when I'm going to be assigned a trip. We both know about that. And so I write. I have these geckos in my office, and they are opportunistic feeders, meaning that they eat. You put food out for them. If you put too much, they'll get fat because they'll feed because they don't know when the next meal is coming, and they're not smart enough to realize that you're bringing this food to them every night. So I'm an opportunistic writer. I write when I can, because I never know when 4 solid days are going to be taken up by a flying trip, where I'm flying 8 hours of actual flight time a day with 16-hour duty times, where I'm hopping between airports and sometimes countries. So my writing schedule is, I have a whole day to write, as fast as I can. My process for creating, though, is based on story. I do believe that we all have certain story elements, story beats, I call them, ingrained in our being by our creator, to help us identify with his story and his seeking of fellowship with us, his created. And in fact, Joseph Campbell in The Hero with a Thousand Faces brought this out. It's an interesting book, because he tried to psychoanalyze the human race. He was an amateur psychologist. He was a professional mythologist. And so the psychology isn't that great, but the mythology sort of organization and analysis of mythology in that story is fantastic, because it shows us that stories from all across culture, from all across time, have these same elements. And he applies it to this Kantian sort of collective unconscious. Well, I apply it to our creator. He put those beats into us to help us have fellowship with him. However you want to identify the theory, the facts are the same. Those stories are, if you write a story today, it will have some of the, they may not be in the best order, and you'll have to organize and do and rearrange and highlight, but they'll be there because it's part of who we are. And so I have made an effort to really study these story beats, and then that's how I go through my process, and they become sort of my path through the woods as I write. I go off and explore other areas. I climb a tree, I go look over a vista, but I always have that path there to stay with me.
Interesting. That's an interesting way to put it. I don't think I've ever heard any other author describe it that way. So, I don't even know who the quote goes to, but everybody has one good book in them. It's always been one of those things you hear. Not that I'm interested in writing a book, but it seems like a lot of work to me. I'd rather just read them. That's much easier.
It is a lot of work. I'll tell you that.
Yeah. So, but, and one of the things almost every time when we do these live is we get the questions about what are you reading? I should probably ask first is, are you a reader?
I am,
I'm not judging here. I'm just,
I don't actually really get to go out and seek books anymore, because I'm constantly getting requests to read stuff. I actually had the privilege for the last couple of years of reading the Murder, She Wrote books before they were published. So I was the sort of and the go-to early reviewer for the Murder, She Wrote series for a little while, and that was kind of fun to get back into Jessica Fletcher and all of that, and Cabot Cove. But right now I am reading Lights Out by Natalie Walters, upcoming book, and is crushing to know that somebody is so much better of a writer than you are. This story is so good. It's so well written. That's what I'm reading right now is Natalie's book. It's fantastic. It's a counterterrorism CIA story. You would think that she was in an agency office, by the realism in it, and speaking from experience and knowing some of these people, she is spot on. So I'm wondering what she knows. We're going to have a talk. But she's doing, it's a fantastic story. So that's what I'm reading right now.
Good. Oh, that's interesting. And so you mentioned, mysteries and romantic suspense with Natalie. Is that one of your favorite genres, or do you prefer, something else? And we're going to talk about this in a little while about what your work in progress is. So is there, or are you just one of these that's what I need to read now, so I like all the genres?
I'm pretty close to that. I would say if I had to choose a favorite, my favorite genre is fantasy. So when I do get time to read for myself, I go to Brandon Sanderson, who's got some great stories. His are very imaginative worlds. And I go back to Tolkien. I go back to C.S. Lewis as almost a reset. It's almost like taking a huge breather to go back to those stories. So those are sort of my foundation. And then Clive Cussler, which his later stuff, especially because later on in his life, he grew to feel the same way I do about clean writing. But it's almost that mix of fantasy and military tech, that Clive Cussler adventure. And so that's another thing that's like going home for me.
I love Clive Cussler. My father-in-law and I, when he was still alive, would race to the library as soon as we heard about a new one to put our names down first. And then be like, oh, he's got his name down first. I had to wait for him to read it.
There you go.
Yeah, I still read him. I listen to him on audio a little more than I used to, just because it's a fun one to listen to going back forth to work. So, but still love his books. I stumbled on his the train guy, and I can't think of the name of the series now.
I know exactly what you're saying, and I'm drawing a blank.
Yeah, totally blank. We'll think of it at like 3 a.m. tonight. So don't text me at that time.
I won't.
But I stumbled on those a couple of years ago and just love them. My heart still belongs to Dirt Pick, but yeah, those are good books. Not everybody knows them, so I'm impressed. So.
Isaac Bell, the Isaac Bell series.
Ah, yes.
The Wrecker. I have that one signed by Clive from Poison Pen.
Yes, that is such a good one. So, and I really enjoyed those. So, another question people ask, and it always cracks me up that they ask this, is how long does it normally take you to write a book?
When is the deadline?
That's a legitimate answer.
Yeah, I would like 9 months to write a book. That would my optimum time frame for a book is 9 months. That gives me about 6 weeks of planning, plotting, and really digging down into some research elements to fill in some gaps. And then that gives me, 6 months to write the book, and another 6 weeks to edit the book before I turn it in. I have every single one of my books. I have received a comment from the editor. This is a squeaky clean book. That doesn't mean that I don't make mistakes, and they still go through and they do Chicago Manual style stuff. But between my wife and I, she's my frontline editor. Awesome. We do work hard to make our editors' jobs easy.
Your editors love you, I'm sure. Oh, that's good. So that's not a bad time frame. Now, you talked a little bit about, doing plotting and such. Are you more of an outline person, or do you kind of let the story organically develop once the research is done?
No, I am definitely an outline person. I'm wondering if I can move the screen here. You can kind of see in the corner That's my board. That is an 8-foot long board. So you're only seeing about 2 feet of it there. But I am definitely a plotter. But like I said, I don't treat that as formulaic. I do my outline. It takes, like I said, it takes 6 weeks to develop it. And I mean, I plot out emotion, I plot out action, and then I go back, and that's my path through the woods. And when I begin writing, sometimes the characters take me to another place, and that's okay. Talia Inger in Griffin Heist in the Clandestine Service series, that story started out where my primary focus was morality and espionage, and exploration of morality and espionage. Where does God fit in? But as I began writing that, Talia sort of revealed, or God revealed to me through Talia, that this was a story about Christ's forgiveness and our need to forgive. And one of the really interesting things about that was, right as I realized that that's what Talia was telling me, and that's where I needed to take that, I got excited, and I said, okay, now I know what I'm supposed to do with Talia. And I wrote it on my board, big red letters. This is a story about Christ's forgiveness. And then the phone rang, and I had to go fly to Amsterdam. And I was so mad. But guess who I flew with? I flew with Philippe de Chambrier. Philippe de Chambrier is one of our pilots, and a lot of pilots do things, something else on the side, so to speak. And what Philippe does is he is a counselor, a Christian counselor, who helps people who have suffered severe trauma or injury learn how to forgive, people who have had a family relative mugged and killed, or even worse. He teaches them how to forgive, which is what I needed to teach Talia in the story. So God put me for a grand total of 16 hours of flight time in the flight deck with a captive audience of the one expert I needed to talk to for that story.
Isn't that amazing?
It's incredible.
All taken care of. That's awesome. That is really a great story, because I would be like you. I've got this planned out. Now I'm mad.
Now I'm mad. I want to get started. I want to start writing, but God says, no, you need to talk to this guy first.
Yeah. Oh, that makes
you
more
don't
sense.
know what you need to know.
Yeah, he does that once in a while.
Yeah.
Right on the forehead there. So with that thought, then, that I can see that with Talia, that you did have it, but have you ever had, like, even a background character like go wander off completely in the wrong direction, and you went, I didn't know we were going there?
Mac did that for me in Talia's series. Drake did that in the Nick Barron series for me. Yeah.
Okay.
Tyrion in Wolf Soldier does that as well.
Okay.
So yeah, I mean, once you start writing them, you don't, there's that whole theory about, I've got to build this giant character background story, and I have to build their whole life. But I start writing. I don't do that. I don't subscribe to that. I do, like I said, spend 6 weeks researching and plotting. So I do know a lot about my characters, but you don't really get to know them until you start to work with them. I can go online on my company and see the profile of the pilot I'm going to fly with. I'm not going to know that pilot until I spend 2, 3, 4, 5, 18 hours on a flight deck with them.
Right.
So I don't know my characters until I spend those hours with them on the page.
Oh, interesting. That's neat to hear. So it's unexpected that you have a mixture of the good plotting, but the good kind of organic writing too. So that's an interesting, different perspective on that. So you brought up Wolf Soldier. So why don't you tell us all about that? There's a lot of details in there, they're fascinating. I really am looking forward to this book. I saw the cover for it. I saw a little synopsis for it. We need some, and I'm going to say it's with Enclave Publishing, who is a Christian publisher of fantasy novels, and we need some really good fantasy novels out there. I know a lot of fantasy readers, so I'm excited for this, but there's a lot of elements to it. So what you got was Wolf Soldier. So
Wolf Soldier is a really, really interesting story. You see that red box behind me? Got to do the mirror point. There it is. That red box is Dragon Raid. And Dragon Raid was a game in the 1980s. It was a Christian it's called an adventure learning system. What folks today would probably call a role-playing or a guided role-playing game. It's not really a true role-playing game. It's almost like a choose your adventure Bible study, with a lot of freedom of movement. And I was a pastor's kid in Colorado Springs, and next to the Navigators, next to IBS, and I guinea pigged every youth discipleship program on the planet, I swear. And the one that had the biggest impact on my life is that one. It's Dragon Raid, the Light Raider Academy, the discipleship learning based on the fruit of the Spirit and the armor of God, and understanding how to nurture those through allegorical fantasy situations. And so, my whole life, through the Air Force Academy, through the A-10, the stealth bomber, the things that I did, the Light Raider Academy and being a Light Raider was always, that's always there in the back of my mind, because it's that foundation of kingdom sort of warrior training. And so when I grew older and I had boys, two boys, I decided to go find a set of this game. I knew it had been out and it had gone out of print for a very long time, almost 30 years. And so, but I found a copy and I was in between some stories. There were some negotiations with a brand name thriller that I was hoping to write for. And I wrote a bunch of these stories for my kids, these adventures. And I sent them to the guy who had given me the box, because I knew that there was a community online that was using these kind of adventures, creating their own adventures. Anyway, long story short, it wound up with the original creator of the game. And he decided to pass the intellectual property to me. And so I basically purchased in a very small transfer the intellectual property for this fantasy world. And now we are moving it forward in games, in novels. We have a new scripture memory card game coming out, and they all work together. So Enclave picked up the novel version for a trilogy of young adult fantasy books. It was a dream of mine since I was 14 to write a novel in this world. So it was definitely a labor of love. And I'm looking forward to writing the next two books in the series. This is my beat up 1984 reference copy of the handbook from Light Raider Academy, and that we're now updating. But yes, it was fun to write. We have taken that game world. So what's interesting about it was you had this game world that had little kind of locations. So if you imagine a whole fantasy world that's possible, but most of that fantasy world is in scaffolding with, sort of a mist hovering over it. And you have little islands of filled in map. What we have to do to take that game where, because it's just a short game and it's hitting it at a sort of hitting the world at a shallow level. It's these isolated pockets. We have to take that. I'm working with James R. Brown, who is one of the people who worked on the J.R.R. Tolkien One Ring games. He's really been instrumental in the world as well. But anyway, we're taking that and we're filling that world in, and that's a big job. Wolf Soldier is a big part of the beginning of that, but we've created a language for it. And that's been fun. We have got these scripture memory cards, the language in the story, the elder tongue. We only do the Bible verses so that we don't take the reader out of the fantasy world. And for some other theological reasons, we only do the Bible verses in the elder tongue in the story. And then the characters sort of give almost a summary in just key words or concepts as they understand and translate the words for the reader. What's fun is the scriptures in the game, the scriptures in our memory card game, scriptures in the book, they're all match up. They're all in sync. And so you can take those scripture memory cards, you can go through the book and you can try to identify which verses that are spoken in the elder tongue are actually the scripture. And you can see on the card, it says what effects that have in the allegorical fantasy world. And you can see that happening to the characters in the book. And so anyway, it's been fun to make that all marry up and plant Easter eggs and all that stuff.
Interesting. So somebody who hasn't played the game back in the 80s, like me, am I going to be completely lost, or is this?
No, not at all. Not at all. So this is a story that stands on its own. that relates to the game world. And we're not the first ones to do this. I think we're the first ones to do this in a Christian context.
Okay.
But absolutely, no, the Wolf Soldier is probably what we hope is a great introduction to the fantasy world. We're also on woodridge.org doing an origin story for the world that's set a couple of centuries before Wolf Soldier. And that one readers can participate in. So they can go, the first chapter is up on woodridge.org. They can go and they can read the first chapter of The Fountain and the Flame and tell us what they want Kaya, the main character, to do next. There's a multiple choice. There's 3 multiple choice. And so then I'll write the next chapter based on everybody's choices there. And so it's a community reader directed story to create an origin story for this world.
Oh, interesting. And what was that website again?
Woodridge.org.
Okay, perfect. That way we can join in the fun. We could do something weird. No, that sounds interesting though, because that's a neat way to get introduced to a book that's coming. So, and know some of the background characters. So, well, that all sounds fascinating. I'm looking forward to it. I have to admit, I'm not one of the role-playing game person. They came out a little bit after I would have done them and started in them, so I just never got caught in them. But I know some people that do, and so I'm looking forward to sharing this story with them.
Well, the thing about those games and with I think Dragon Raid was one of the things about it is it was much closer to that role-playing game format. And if you imagine the Venn diagram of youth who need the discipleship training in the armor of God and the fruit of the Spirit on one circle, and youth who are willing to spend 5 to 7 hours every Saturday playing a massive fantasy world campaign, it meets in the middle here. And there's 300 of them. They're all on our Facebook page already. What we need to do is reach this broader group. And so we're taking those concepts. Yes, we're creating new adventures for this group, but we're creating much more condensed, choose your own adventure style guided Bible study products. James has come up with some very, very innovative stuff that we're going to be launching this summer. That are not that detailed campaign role-playing game, so we can reach that larger group of youth. Awesome.
Anything we can do to help reach kids, man. I'm 100% behind that. So
I appreciate that.
That's awesome. So I look forward to it. I look forward to reading it. Let me tell you guys got to go out and get the Paris Betrayal, because if nothing else, join Ravel at their book club, because some of these questions are fascinating, but you're going to need to read the book first, because I would have asked them, but we'd have given away a lot of major plot twists. So I don't want to do that either. So we hate that when that happens. So I am so glad you joined us today. We had lots of fun. I am looking forward to all the works you got coming out, not only with Wolf Soldier, but hopefully more of the spy novels that you write. They're just good. They're just fun to read.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
You're very welcome. And we talked about genres, and spy novels is one of those that I've always enjoyed. I'd make a rotten spy, because this is always whatever emotion I'm thinking. So that's just a bad thing in a spy world. But I do like reading them, so I don't know if that counts or not. But hey, you were saying that you had some fun stuff that for anybody that purchases the Paris Betrayal. Why don't you tell us about that a little bit?
Okay, so if someone purchases the Paris Betrayal from Baker Bookhouse, this is a special gift pack for those. We did send out as a pre-order pack. Now we're narrowing that, now that the book has come out, to the Baker Bookhouse gift pack, and we have a really cool lapel pin. The pack includes a lapel pin from Chasing the White Lion, which is pretty snazzy, and a lapel pin for Paris Betrayal, plus a bookmark and a postcard for the Paris Betrayal as well. So if we receive a Baker Bookhouse receipt via jamesrhannibal.com on our contact page, you can upload an image of the receipt. Then just make sure that you send a US address and an email, and we will send you the gift pack with the 2 lapel pins and the bookmark and the postcard.
Oh, awesome. And just my own little plug, at bakerbookhouse.com, you can pick up Paris Betrayal at 30% off with free shipping in the continent of the US. So you're getting a good deal too. So, well, thanks for sharing that.
Sure.
couldn't be live, but I am so glad we could do this and introduce you to other readers. Hopefully that we can get more of your books out there and get them interested. So I appreciate that. And you guys, thanks for joining us tonight.
Thank you.
Yeah. Is there any